Assalamualaikum and greetings, children. So today, continuing our module 8, where were you yesterday? Sorry, where were you yesterday? Yes, correct. So where were you yesterday? Now we're moving to the new page, which is in your textbook, which is on page 78. Yeah, this page. Right, but before we start, let's look at some of the words that you need to know. Noisy, noisy, noisy. It comes from the word noise. Look at the kids back there. He's banging the drum, isn't it? So it is noisy. Sometimes we like noisy situation, isn't it? Sometimes we like it silence. Okay, but most of the time we don't like noisy, right? So the next word is carriage. Carriage. You can see here. Carriage. It's a car during the ancient years. Nowadays, we still have carriage, but we don't see them around. Maybe in some special places only. Right. So these are the two words that you need to know for this lesson, for our lesson today. So, alright, class. Now we're going to read. Listen and read. A city from the past. This is a picture of New York City in the year 19. Or you can say 1900. It was very different then. There weren't any shopping centers or cinemas, but there were shops and theaters. Right. Let's go to the next paragraph. There weren't many cars back then, but there were lots of horses and carriages. The streets of New York City weren't quiet. There were noisy and full of people just like today. Right. Let me explain briefly. Right. So, a city from the past. We're talking about New York City. Do you know where is New York City? I bet all of you know, isn't it? It's very famous. It's where the Spider-Man lives, isn't it? New York City is in America, United States of America. So this is a picture of New York City in the year of 19. Okay, right. You can see here, black and white. Right. There weren't any shopping centers or cinemas, but there were shops and theaters. Back then, they don't have shopping centers, but there are lots of shops. Right. And there weren't any cinemas. Weren't, meaning were not. There were not any shopping centers or cinema, meaning that they don't have shopping centers or cinemas back then, but there were shops and theaters. We already learned theaters where people act on stage. So that was their entertainment back then. They don't have cinema like us nowadays, isn't it? So look at the second one. There weren't many cars. Yes, there were cars, but there were not many. Okay, back then. But there were lots of horses. Before people ride on the horses because they don't have cars, they don't have motorcycles, buses, and carriage. Of course, carriage. You have seen the picture just now, isn't it? Right. So the street of New York City weren't quiet, meaning they are noisy. They were noisy, sorry. They were noisy. They were noisy. The opposite meaning of quiet. Quiet is noisy. They were noisy and full of people, just like today. Nowadays, it is also like that. But the scenery is different. Now people using cars, buses, motorcycles, and stuff like that. But they were noisy back then and now. So it was a very busy city, isn't it? Right. So I hope you understand, because after this you're going to do some exercise. I think pretty much. I mean, there's a lot of exercise you're going to do after this. Right. I hope you are ready. So the second activity is your exercise, which you have to do. Right, let's look at number 2. What was there in New York City in year 19? Read activity 1 and tick. So you have to tick at the at the boxes there. You have to read it again. Okay. Right. For activity 3, you have to look at activity 2. Just now you have to look at activity 1, isn't it? This is activity 1. Now you have to look at activity 2 and write about New York City in the year 19. Use were or weren't. You can choose there. Right? You can choose were or weren't. Okay? Still, you need to read. You still have to look at the activity 1. Activity 2 will help. Activity 1 is the main source. Okay? Right. The next one. Lots of exercise today. Which one was Mr. Miller's town 80 years ago? Okay. I read it for you. 80 years ago, there weren't any shopping centers in my town. There were only small shops. There weren't many cars, but there were lots of bikes. Okay. The streets were quiet. Okay, it's not noisy, it's not like New York City. Sometimes there were police officers on horses. There were 2 theaters, but there weren't any cinemas. So you have to identify which city was Mr. Miller's town 80 years ago. Which one is it? Is it A, is it B, or is it C? Read it again. Right. And the next exercise. Look at the picture of this town from the year 19 and write. Okay. For right. So you have to choose which is the correct words that you can fill in the blanks there. In the year 19, the street noisy. There weren't any but there were horses and so what are you going to fill there? There a few shops and there so what you going to fill there? It's quite easy actually. All you need to do is you have to read it again, right? So I guess that's all, class. I wish you all the best. Take care and goodbye.